The night I realized my family never planned to let me choose my own life was the night my mother asked me to sign a document I wasn't allowed to read. It was a Wednesday in early December, cold enough that the windows of my parents' house in Westfield, New Jersey, fogged over from the inside. Christmas decorations were already up. Not because anyone felt festive, but because my mother believed tradition could cover up anything if you layered it thick enough. Pine garlands along the staircase, white lights on the banister, a porcelain nativity set on the sideboard that no one ever looked at. I was 30 years old, standing in my childhood dining room, holding a pen that felt heavier than it should have. "Just sign here, Claire," my mother said gently, as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 30. I work in operations management for a regional logistics company. I don't drink much. I don't raise my voice. I've never been arrested, never caused a scene at a family gathering, never once been called difficult. I'm the daughter people forget is in the room because I learned early that silence made life easier." That night, my father sat at the head of the table, hands folded over his stomach, watching me the way a supervisor watches an employee finish an unpleasant task. My younger brother Evan wasn't there yet. He was running late, as usual. No one minded when Evan ran late. "What is this?" I asked, finally. My mother smiled, too quickly. "Just something for the family business. Routine paperwork. Your father wants everything settled before the holidays." I looked down. The document was face down, stapled, at least 10 pages thick. "I'd like to read it," I said. The room went quiet in that specific way that meant I'd crossed an invisible line. My father cleared his throat. "There's no need. It's been reviewed by our attorney." "Our attorney, not mine. I still want to read it." My mother reached out and touched my wrist. Her hand was warm, steady. "Claire, honey, don't make this harder than it needs to be." That sentence landed harder than anything else she could have said, because it confirmed what I'd felt my entire life, that my questions were obstacles, that my autonomy was inconvenient. "I'm not refusing," I said carefully. "I just want to understand what I'm signing." My father leaned back in his chair. "This is why your grandmother always worried about you." There it was, the familiar maneuver. Make me the problem, the overly cautious one, the one who couldn't just trust. For context, my family owns a mid-sized construction supply company, Whitmore Materials, founded by my grandfather after the war. Gravel, concrete, commercial contracts. It's not glamorous, but it's profitable. It paid for my parents' house, my brother's private school, his college tuition, his failed startup, his second chance, and his third. It never paid for me. I paid my own way through Rutgers, lived with 3 roommates, took the bus, worked weekends. When I graduated, my father shook my hand like I was an intern who'd completed a satisfactory rotation. "Good," he said. "Now you can take care of yourself." Evan, meanwhile, was finding himself at 28 with a credit card my father quietly paid off every 6 months. I didn't resent Evan. Not exactly. Resentment requires energy. What I felt was more like resignation. That night, though, something felt different. "Where's Evan?" I asked. "He'll be here," my mother said. "We wanted to get this done before dinner." That was another red flag. In my family, nothing important ever waited for Evan. I flipped the document over despite myself. The heading was dense. Legal language, trust amendment, power of attorney, asset reallocation. My stomach tightened. "Mom," I said slowly, "this says—" My father stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Claire, enough. This is about efficiency. You don't need to be involved in everything." Involved in everything. Like my own future. "I'm being asked to waive something," I said. My voice sounded calm even to me. That scared me more than if I'd been shaking. "What am I waiving?" My mother finally dropped her smile. Just a little. "Your claim." "On what?" She hesitated. Just long enough. "The company. The estate. It's simpler if Evan—" The front door opened then. Evan's voice drifted in, loud, cheerful, carrying the cold with him. "Sorry, traffic was insane." Perfect timing. Always. He walked into the dining room, glanced at the papers, and froze. Just for a second. Then he smiled at me, the way you smile at someone who's about to do you a favor. "You signing?" he asked. I looked at my brother. really looked at him. The expensive coat, the confidence that comes from knowing there's always a net beneath you. "What is this?" I asked him. He shrugged. "Dad's just cleaning things up. You know how he is." Cleaning things up. Like I was a loose end. My father picked up the pen and placed it closer to my hand. "We've supported you in our way. This is how families work. Everyone has a role." I understood then, with absolute clarity. My role wasn't daughter. It wasn't partner. It wasn't equal. It was obstacle. I didn't sign, not that night. I slid the pen back across the table and said, "I'll have my own lawyer look at this." The reaction was immediate. My father's face hardened. My mother's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Evan's smile vanished. "You don't trust us?" my mother whispered. I stood up, my legs steady. I trust myself. No one followed me to the door. No one stopped me. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "You're overreacting. We'll talk after Christmas." That was the moment the open loop formed, though I didn't have words for it yet. The moment I realized that whatever this was, it had been planned long before that night. Planned quietly, patiently, and I was already behind. I didn't know then that refusing to sign that document would cost me my place in the family. I didn't know it would lead to lawyers, a will I'd never seen, a wedding I'd be excluded from, and a truth about my grandmother that no one wanted me to uncover. But as I pulled into my apartment parking lot and turned off the engine, one thought settled in with chilling clarity. They weren't asking for my signature. They were asking for my silence. And I had just said, no. Christmas came anyway. It always does, no matter what breaks underneath it. 2 days after that dinner, my mother sent a group text. Just logistics. Christmas Eve at their house, same as always, 6 p.m. No mention of the document. No acknowledgement that I'd walked out. In my family, silence wasn't avoidance. It was strategy. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was debating whether to go, but because I was deciding how. When you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early that presence is interpreted as compliance. If you show up, you're agreeing to the version of reality they present. If you don't, you're labeled dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. There's no neutral option. I texted back the next morning. I'll come, but I won't sign anything without legal review. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. My mother replied, "Of course, there's nothing to worry about." That sentence should have reassured me. Instead, it confirmed everything. I spent the week before Christmas doing something I'd never done before. I called a lawyer. Her name was Denise Caldwell, mid-50s, family law and estate planning. A recommendation from a coworker who'd gone through a brutal inheritance dispute after her father died. Denise didn't interrupt when I explained. She listened, took notes, asked questions my parents never would. "Did they give you a copy of the document?" she asked. "No." "Did they explain what you'd be waiving?" "Not clearly." "Did they pressure you to sign immediately?" "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "That's not routine paperwork, Claire." I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic. Validation. "I want you to request the full trust documents," Denise continued. "All amendments. And I want you to do it in writing." "They won't give them to me." "They'll have to," she said calmly. "If you're named anywhere in the original structure, they can't legally exclude you without disclosure." Named anywhere. That phrase stayed with me. Christmas Eve arrived, gray and damp. I drove to my parents' house alone, the radio off, my thoughts loud. When I pulled into the driveway, Evan's car was already there. New. Luxury SUV. I didn't recognize the model, only the price range. Inside, everything smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat. The same carols played every year. The same ornaments hung in the same places. It was like walking into a staged version of my childhood, frozen at its most functional. My grandmother's portrait hung in the hallway. Eleanor Whitmore. She died 3 years earlier. Sharp-eyed, quiet. The only person in my family who ever asked what I wanted. I hadn't thought about her much lately, thinking about her hurt in a dull, background way. "Claire," my mother said when she saw me. Her smile was tight, controlled. "You made it." "So did you," I said, stepping inside. Dinner was polite, painfully so. Evan talked about a new opportunity he was excited about. My father nodded, asked the right questions. No one asked about my job. Halfway through dessert, my father stood. "Let's talk business." "Of course." He motioned toward the study. Evan followed without hesitation. My mother looked at me expectantly. "I'll stay here," I said. My father stopped. "Claire, I said I'd come for Christmas," I replied, "not for paperwork." A pause. Then, quietly, "We need to resolve this." "I agree," I said, "which is why my lawyer will be in touch." That was when Evan laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just amused. "You hired a lawyer? Seriously?" I looked at him. "Yes." "For what?" he asked. "There's nothing for you to lose." The room went still. My father spoke before I could. "That's enough." But Evan had already said it. Out loud. The thing they'd all been operating on silently for years. "Nothing for you to lose." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I stood up, picked up my coat, and said, "I'll see myself out." My mother followed me to the door. "You're taking this the wrong way." "There is no right way to be excluded," I said. She flinched. "You're still family." I looked at her. "Then why does everything feel conditional?" She didn't answer. Outside, as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Claire, this is Thomas Riley. I represent Whitmore Materials. Please call me." Their lawyer. I didn't call him. I forwarded the message to Denise. 2 days later, Denise called me back. Her voice was different this time. Sharper. "I got the documents," she said. "And?" "You were named in the original trust. Equal beneficiary. 50-50. My hands tightened around the phone. "But," she continued, "there was an amendment filed 18 months ago." My stomach dropped. "What kind of amendment?" "One that removes you entirely." I sat down hard on my couch. "Signed by your father," Denise said, "and notarized." "When?" I asked. 6 months after your grandmother died." "Eleanor." I closed my eyes. "There's more," Denise said. "The amendment references a letter, a directive from your grandmother, supposedly expressing intent to leave the business solely to Evan." "Supposedly," I repeated. "Yes," Denise said, "because the letter isn't on file." Silence stretched between us. "Claire," she said carefully, "did your grandmother ever say anything to you about her will?" I thought of Eleanor, sitting at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, asking me about my work, my plans, my life. I thought of the day she pressed a small envelope into my hand and told me to keep it safe. "Yes," I said slowly, "she did." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Don't let them decide who you are.'" Denise didn't speak for a moment. "I think," she said finally, "we need to talk about undue influence." That night, I took out the envelope I'd never opened. It was still where I'd left it, in a drawer, untouched, unremarkable. Inside was a handwritten note and a copy of a will. I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat open on my kitchen table, its contents spread out like evidence at a crime scene. My grandmother's handwriting was unmistakable, slanted slightly to the right, firm, controlled. The kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who chose her words carefully and meant them. The will was dated 8 months before her death, not the one my parents had probated. This one named me and Evan as equal beneficiaries, not just of the company, but of the house, the accounts, everything. There were annotations in the margins, clarifications, instructions. It wasn't a draft. It was finished, signed, witnessed, legal. My hands shook, not from shock, but from the slow, heavy realization of what that meant. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd replaced her wishes with their own. At 2 a.m, I emailed Denise scanned copies of everything. The will, the note, the envelope itself. Her response came just after 6. "This changes everything. Do not confront them yet. We need to verify chain of custody and timing. Do not confront them yet." That instruction went against every instinct I had. I wanted to call my mother, ask her how she could look me in the eye at Christmas and pretend nothing was wrong. I wanted to ask my father when exactly he decided I was disposable. I wanted to ask Evan if he knew. But Denise was right. Emotion makes people careless. My family had been careful for years. I went to work anyway, sat in meetings, answered emails, approved shipments. It felt surreal to discuss delivery schedules while my entire understanding of my family was quietly unraveling. At noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "We should talk. Dad's upset. You're blowing this out of proportion." I stared at the screen. Dad's upset. Not, "You're hurt." Not, "There's been a misunderstanding." Not, "Let's clear this up." Dad's upset. I didn't reply. That evening, Denise called again. "I pulled probate records," she said. "Your grandmother's estate was settled unusually fast." "How fast?" 3 months. For an estate of that size, that's aggressive. "Because they wanted it done before anyone noticed," I said. "Because they wanted it done before you asked questions," she corrected. She explained it patiently. How wills can be superseded, how amendments can be challenged, how letters that conveniently go missing raise red flags, how undue influence cases hinge on timing, access, and motive. "Your father had motive," she said. "Control, continuity, favoritism, and Evan." She paused. "Access." That word hit harder than I expected. Evan lived 10 minutes from my grandmother during her last year. I lived 3 hours away. I visited when I could. He was there constantly, helping, managing, advising. I thought of how often he'd told me, "She's doing fine, no need to worry." I thought of how rarely she'd answered her phone near the end. "Claire," Denise said gently, "this will get ugly. I know. Your family will deny everything. I know. They'll say you're greedy, that you're unstable, that you're rewriting history." I smiled without humor. They've been practicing that narrative my whole life. We filed the petition a week later. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. A formal challenge to the amended trust and the probated will. A request for discovery, medical records, correspondence, financial transactions. The reaction was immediate. My mother called first. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "You're attacking your own family." "No," I replied. "I'm responding to what was done to me." There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "Your father did what he thought was best." "For who?" "For everyone," she insisted. "Everyone except me," I said. She hung up. "My father didn't call. He sent a letter. 4 pages, typed, formal, accusing me of betrayal, ingratitude, and manufacturing conflict for personal gain." Denise read it and shook her head. "He's building a record." "So am I," I said. Evan finally showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He looked smaller than I remembered, less certain. "This is insane," he said, walking past me like he belonged there. "You're tearing everything apart." I closed the door behind him. "You mean I'm not playing along anymore?" He turned. "You don't even want the company. You never did. That's not the point. It is to Dad." "Then maybe Dad's wrong," he scoffed. "You think Grandma meant to give you half? You barely visited." I felt something snap. Not loudly. Quietly. "She gave me this," I said, holding up the envelope. His face changed. Just a flicker. "You weren't supposed to have that," he said. The room went very still. "I wasn't supposed to have my own grandmother's will?" I asked calmly. He swallowed. "She was confused near the end." "She wasn't," I said, "and you know it." He looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. "I'm leaving," he muttered. "Evan," I said. He stopped. "Did you know they cut me out?" He didn't answer. "Did you know before she died?" Silence. "Did you know when you signed those documents as witness?" His shoulders sagged. "Yes," he said quietly. "Dad said it was temporary, just until things stabilized." "Stabilized for who?" He didn't respond. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, the quiet thick around me. I felt grief then. Not sharp, heavy, the kind that settles in your bones. But beneath it was something else. Clarity. They hadn't underestimated me by accident. They had assumed I would do what I always did. Stay quiet. Stay grateful. Stay out of the way. They were wrong. The first court hearing was scheduled for February, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission. By the time February arrived, my family had already decided who I was going to be in their version of this story. I learned that not from them, but from other people. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years texted me late one night. "Heard you're suing your parents. Hope it's worth it." An old family friend sent an email disguised as concern. "Your grandmother would be heartbroken by all this fighting." Even my mother's bridge partner, a woman I'd met maybe twice in my life, somehow had my number. "Families shouldn't tear each other apart over money," she wrote. No one asked what happened. They'd already been told. Denise warned me this would happen. "When people feel exposed," she said, "they don't look inward. They control the narrative." My parents were good at narratives. They'd been writing one about me for decades. The court building in Newark was older than it looked in photos. Beige stone, high ceilings, fluorescent lights that made everyone's skin look tired. I sat beside Denise on a hard wooden bench, hands folded in my lap, listening to my name echo slightly every time it was spoken. Across the room, my father sat with his attorney, Thomas Riley, gray suit, confident posture. Evan sat beside them, eyes forward, jaw set. They didn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her early 60s. No nonsense, sharp eyes. She didn't smile when she entered. That gave me an unexpected sense of relief. This wasn't a family discussion. This was a legal one. The hearing itself was procedural. Motions, requests for discovery, timelines. But when my father's attorney stood and referred to me as a disgruntled adult child motivated by financial regret, something cold settled in my chest. Disgruntled, as if I'd wandered in late to a meeting and decided to complain. Denise didn't react. She let him talk, let him paint the picture. Then she stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "my client is not disgruntled. She is responding to a material change in estate documents executed under questionable circumstances. We are requesting discovery to determine whether the decedent's intent was overridden through undue influence." Undue influence. The judge leaned forward slightly. "That's a serious allegation." "Yes, Your Honor," Denise replied, "and one we believe the evidence will support." The judge nodded once. Discovery granted. Just like that. Outside the courtroom, my father finally looked at me. His face was tight, his mouth a thin line. "You're embarrassing this family," he said. I met his gaze. "You did that without my help." Evan spoke up then. "Claire, please. This doesn't have to go further." "It already has," I said. "You made sure of that." My mother wasn't there. She hadn't come to the hearing. Later, she would tell me it was too painful to watch. At the time, it just felt like absence. Discovery took months. Bank statements, emails, medical records, care logs from my grandmother's in-home nurse, phone records. Patterns emerged. Large transfers from the company to Evan during the same months my grandmother's health declined. Emails from my father to the family attorney marked urgent. A sudden change in my grandmother's primary care physician, one my father recommended, and a note from the nurse. It wasn't dramatic, just an entry in a daily log. "Mrs. Whitmore seemed distressed today. Asked if documents she signed last week could be reversed. Stated she felt pressured. Son present. Patient appeared confused." Son present. Denise called me as soon as she saw it. "This is significant," she said. "This moves us from suspicion to leverage." I felt sick. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just tired. Evan stopped answering my texts. My father sent another letter. This one, angrier. Accusing me of dragging my grandmother's name through the mud. Of poisoning the family against itself. My mother finally called me one evening in March. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said quietly. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall. "You never really knew me." "That's not fair. Neither is rewriting someone's will after they die," I said. She sighed. "Your father is under incredible stress." "And I'm not?" Silence. "You always were the strong one," she said finally. "We thought you'd be fine." There it was. The justification, wrapped in a compliment. You don't need help. You don't need protection. You don't need fairness. I ended the call without raising my voice. A week later, Denise filed a motion to depose my father and Evan. That was the moment things shifted. The emails stopped. The letters stopped. The pressure changed shape. My father's attorney reached out to Denise with a proposal. Settlement. They wanted this over. The offer was generous on paper. A lump sum. No admission of wrongdoing. Confidentiality. Denise laid it out in front of me. This would be the easy way. And the truth? I asked. She didn't sugarcoat it. This would bury it. I thought of my grandmother, of her handwriting, of her quiet voice telling me not to let them decide who I was. I don't want easy, I said. I want it corrected. Denise nodded. Then we keep going. The depositions were scheduled for April. I didn't tell my family. They already knew. The night before my father's deposition, Evan texted me for the first time in weeks. You don't know what you're doing. Dad will never forgive you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for accountability. He didn't reply. The next day, I sat in a conference room and watched my father answer questions under oath. And for the first time, he couldn't control the room. There's a particular sound a room makes when power shifts. It's not loud. It's the absence of noise. The pause after a question that no one expected to be asked. That was the sound in the conference room when my father realized he was no longer in charge. He sat at the far end of the polished table, hands folded, posture rigid. His attorney sat beside him, whispering occasionally, adjusting papers. Denise sat across, calm, prepared, almost gentle in her tone. I sat against the wall, silent by design. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to witness. The court reporter adjusted her machine. We are on the record. Denise began with basics: name, date of birth, role in the company. My father answered confidently at first. This was familiar territory. He'd spent his life talking his way through boardrooms and negotiations. Then, Denise shifted. Mr. Whitmore, when did you last review your mother's estate plan prior to her death? My father cleared his throat. I don't recall the exact date. Approximately. Perhaps a year before. Denise nodded. And at that time, do you recall who the beneficiaries were? Yes, my son Evan. Denise didn't correct him. She simply slid a document across the table. Is this your mother's original trust? My father glanced at it. His jaw tightened. It appears to be. And does it list both Evan Whitmore and Claire Whitmore as equal beneficiaries? A pause. A long one. Yes, he said. I felt my chest tighten. Hearing it out loud mattered more than I expected. And when did that change? Denise asked. My father shifted in his chair. After discussions with my mother about her intentions, discussions that resulted in an amendment filed 6 months after her death, silence. That amendment, Denise continued evenly, references a letter from your mother directing the change. Can you produce that letter? No, my father said. Why not? I don't have it. Did it exist? He hesitated. Yes. Where is it now? I don't know. Denise let that hang in the air. Then she leaned forward slightly. Mr. Whitmore, were you present when your mother signed the amendment to her trust? Yes. Was Evan present? Yes. Was Claire present? No. Did you inform her of the amendment at the time? No. Why not? My father's voice hardened. Because it wasn't necessary. Denise didn't argue. She moved on. Your mother's nurse documented that your mother expressed confusion and distress regarding documents she signed in the weeks leading up to her death. Were you aware of that? No. Did you accompany your mother to medical appointments during that period? Yes. Did you ever restrict her access to phone calls or visitors? No. Did you ever speak on her behalf when she appeared uncertain? Yes, he said quickly, then corrected himself. I mean, only to help. Help. Denise closed her folder. No further questions at this time. It felt anticlimactic, like a storm that passed quietly but left everything soaked. Evan's deposition was worse. He arrived late, avoided eye contact, tried to joke with the court reporter. The bravado didn't last. Mr. Whitmore, Denise asked, were you aware that your sister was removed from the trust? Yes. When did you become aware? Before my grandmother died. Did you inform your sister? No. Why not? Dad told me not to. Did you believe the change reflected your grandmother's wishes? Evan hesitated. I believed my father. Denise tilted her head. That wasn't my question. No, Evan said finally. I didn't know. Afterward, Evan didn't speak to me. He walked out without a glance. My father left with his attorney, his face unreadable. 2 weeks later, the settlement offer doubled. This time, Denise didn't bring it to me immediately. She waited until the end of the day, after my work hours, after I'd had time to breathe. They're nervous, she said. The nurse's note is powerful. So are the inconsistencies. And the will? I asked. That's the cornerstone. If we go to trial, there's a strong chance the amendment is invalidated. What happens then? The original trust stands. Equal. I thought of what that actually meant. Not just money, not just ownership. Recognition. Correction. A public acknowledgement that what they did was wrong, but also war. If we go to trial, Denise said carefully, your family relationships may not survive. I laughed softly. They already didn't. She watched me for a moment. You're not doing this for the money. No, I said. I'm doing this because they decided my silence was consent. She nodded. Then you're ready. The court date was set for June. Between April and June, my family tried new tactics. My mother left voicemails late at night. Apologies tangled with pressure. We can still fix this, she said. You don't have to destroy everything. My father sent a handwritten note. The first time he'd ever done that. It spoke of legacy, of unity, of mistakes made in grief. It didn't include the word sorry. Evan showed up at my apartment again in May. I'm screwed if this goes to trial, he said bluntly. I looked at him. You made choices. So did you, he shot back. You could have taken the settlement and pretended none of this happened. He rubbed his face. You always had to be right. I shook my head. I just stopped being quiet. He left angry. June came fast. The courtroom was fuller this time. Observers, reporters, friends of the family, people who suddenly remembered I existed. The judge listened, carefully, to everything. When the decision came, it wasn't dramatic. It was precise. The amendment was invalidated. The original will upheld. The trust restored to its original terms. Equal beneficiaries. Undue influence, the judge said, had been demonstrated. I didn't look at my family when the gavel came down. I didn't need to. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy. Release. Outside the courtroom, Denise smiled. You did it. No, I said. I finished it. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. A message from my mother. I don't know who we are anymore. I typed back one sentence. Now you do. Winning didn't feel like I thought it would. There was no rush, no sense of triumph. Just a quiet, disorienting calm. Like stepping out of a long, crowded room and realizing how loud it had been the entire time. The morning after the ruling, I went to work as usual. Same commute, same desk, same inbox full of problems that had nothing to do with my family. It grounded me in a way nothing else could. My life hadn't paused while theirs unraveled. By noon, the calls started. First, my mother. I didn't answer. Then Evan. I didn't answer. Then my father. That one surprised me. I let it go to voicemail. Claire, his voice said, clipped, controlled, but tired. We need to talk about next steps. This decision creates complications. Complications. That was his word for consequences. I forwarded the voicemail to Denise. She called me 10 minutes later. Do not engage directly, she said. All communication goes through counsel now, especially regarding the company. The company. Whitmore Materials was suddenly no longer a family abstraction. I was now a 50% owner. On paper, at least. Denise explained the reality. Equal ownership without a shareholder agreement is a recipe for deadlock. They know that. What do they want? I asked. Control, she said. They'll push for a buyout or operational authority. That evening, Denise sent me a packet. Financials, contracts, board minutes, documents I'd never been allowed to see before. I read until my eyes burned. The picture that emerged wasn't flattering. The company was profitable, yes, but leveraged. Loans taken out quietly, assets used as collateral for Evan's ventures, decisions made without oversight, risk piled on risk. This wasn't just favoritism. It was mismanagement. I requested a formal accounting. My father objected. Through his attorney, of course. Claimed it was unnecessary, disruptive. The judge disagreed. The accounting revealed what my grandmother had suspected and never had time to confront. The company had been treated like a personal safety net. Evan's failed startup, paid for by a line of credit against company assets. His second one? Same. My father's retirement plan? A deferred compensation structure that funneled profits directly to him, regardless of performance. None of it illegal. All of it questionable. When the numbers were laid out in black and white, something shifted again. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about responsibility. Denise leaned back in her chair as we reviewed the report. You have leverage now. What kind? I asked. The kind that lets you demand structure, oversight, or exit. Exit. I thought about what that meant. Cashing out, walking away, letting them keep the mess they'd made. But I also thought about my grandmother, about her insistence on fairness, on accountability. I don't want their money if it comes with their control, I said. But I also won't walk away and let them pretend nothing happened. Denise nodded. Then, you propose a governance change. The proposal was simple on paper. A formal board, independent oversight, limits on personal use of company funds, transparency. In practice, it was an indictment. My father exploded when he received it. He didn't call me. He called Denise. He's accusing you of revenge, Denise told me later, of trying to punish him. I'm not, I said. I'm drawing a line. Evan sent me an email that night. Long, rambling, defensive. You're destroying Dad. You know that, right? I stared at the screen. Destroying Dad. Not holding him accountable. Not protecting the company. Not enforcing boundaries. Destroying Dad. I typed back one sentence. I didn't destroy him. I stopped covering for him. He didn't respond. The board vote was scheduled for August. In the meantime, my mother reached out again. She asked to meet. I agreed, against Denise's advice. We met at a quiet cafe, halfway between our homes. Neutral territory. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. I don't recognize your father anymore, she said after we sat down. I stirred my coffee. Neither do I. He's angry all the time, she continued. At you, at Evan, at himself, I think. I said nothing. I should have protected you, she said suddenly. From all of this. Yes, I replied. She flinched, but didn't argue. I don't know how to fix it, she whispered. I looked at her. Really looked. The woman who'd smoothed everything over, who'd mistaken peacekeeping for love. You don't fix it by asking me to go back, I said. You fix it by accepting that things have changed. She nodded slowly. When the board vote came, it was unanimous. The governance changes passed. My father resigned as CEO 2 weeks later. Not voluntarily, strategically. His attorney framed it as a retirement, a dignified exit. Evan was removed from any role involving financial authority. A professional interim CEO was appointed. The company stabilized. My family didn't. My father stopped calling. My mother called less. Evan disappeared entirely. And for the first time, the silence felt different. It wasn't imposed. It was chosen. One evening in September, Denise called me. They've requested mediation, she said. For what? I asked. To buy you out. I looked out my apartment window at the city lights. On whose terms? I asked. Denise smiled, even through the phone. Yours. Mediation was scheduled for the second Tuesday in October, in a glass-walled conference center overlooking the Passaic River. Neutral ground again. Everything about this process was designed to remove emotion, to flatten history into bullet points and dollar figures. It didn't work. I arrived early with Denise. She wore gray, as always, during negotiations. Calm. Unreadable. I wore black. Not intentionally. It was just what felt right. My family arrived together. That, more than anything else, told me how they planned to play this. My father walked in first, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He looked older than he had a month ago. Not frail, just diminished. Evan followed, hands in his pockets, eyes darting. My mother came last, clutching her purse like an anchor. No one hugged. No one smiled. The mediator introduced himself and explained the rules. Confidential, voluntary, focused on resolution. He spoke as if we were strangers negotiating a parking dispute, not a family dismantling itself in real time. My father spoke first. We want to put this behind us, he said. Claire has made her point. There it was. I didn't respond. He continued. We're prepared to offer a fair buyout, market value, clean separation. Denise leaned forward. We've reviewed your valuation. And? My father asked. And it assumes liabilities you created, remain off the books, she said evenly. That's not acceptable. Evan shifted in his chair. The mediator raised a hand. Let's keep this constructive. It is constructive, Denise said. Transparency is constructive. My father turned to me. You don't belong in this business. I met his eyes. You don't get to decide where I belong. A silence fell over the table. Not awkward. Heavy. My mother spoke then. Claire, please. This has gone far enough. I turned to her. For who? She looked down. The mediator cleared his throat. Perhaps we can discuss non-monetary terms. Denise nodded. My client is open to that. That surprised them. Such as? My father asked warily. Public correction, Denise said. An acknowledgement filed with the court regarding the original will and the invalidated amendment. My father's face flushed. Absolutely not. Then we don't have a deal, Denise replied. Evan leaned forward. You want to humiliate us? No, I said calmly. I want the record corrected. So people know you won, he snapped. So people know I wasn't lying, I said. That landed. The mediator took notes. Anything else? Yes, Denise said. My client wants a clean exit. No ongoing ties, no advisory role, no family veto power. And the price? My father asked. Denise slid a document across the table. It was higher than their original offer, lower than what I could have demanded if I wanted to drag this out. Fair. My father stared at the number. You don't deserve this, he said quietly. I felt something in my chest loosen. Maybe not, I replied, but I earned it anyway. The mediation ended without agreement. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, Denise called. They accepted, she said. I closed my eyes. All terms, she continued, including the correction. The correction was filed quietly. A legal acknowledgement that the amendment had been invalidated due to undue influence. No press release. No apology. Just truth, recorded. The buyout closed in November. The money landed in my account on a gray Friday morning. I stared at the number longer than I should have. Not because it felt unreal, but because it felt final. I paid off my student loans that afternoon. Then I sat in my car and cried. Not from relief, from exhaustion. My father sent one last message through Denise. I hope you're satisfied. I didn't reply. Evan sent nothing. My mother sent a card at Christmas. No money, no guilt. Just a sentence written in careful handwriting. I'm trying to learn how to let go. I put it in a drawer. Life didn't transform overnight. I didn't move into a mansion. I didn't quit my job. I didn't suddenly feel whole. What changed was quieter. I stopped bracing myself before family holidays. I stopped checking my phone after meetings, waiting for the next accusation. I stopped replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I should have said differently. One evening in January, I had dinner with a coworker who knew some of what I'd been through. Do you miss them? She asked carefully. I thought about it. I miss who I thought they were, I said, not who they showed me. In February, I signed papers for a small condo closer to work. My name alone on the deed. No co-signers, no expectations. As I walked through the empty rooms for the first time, keys warm in my hand, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, ownership. Of my space, my time, my future. I hadn't taken revenge. I hadn't ruined anyone. I'd done something far more unsettling. I'd removed myself from their control. And in doing so, I'd forced them to sit with who they were, without me cushioning the truth. That, I realized, was the real turning point. The first Thanksgiving I didn't spend with my family felt wrong in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not lonely, just unfamiliar. I flew to Portland to spend the holiday with a friend from college, someone who'd once slept on my couch when her marriage fell apart and never asked for explanations. Her house was loud, a little chaotic, full of mismatched chairs and people who talked over one another without malice. No one assigned seats, no one kept score. At one point, while we were cooking, she handed me a knife and said, "You okay?" I realized I was waiting for instructions. "I think so," I said. "I'm just not used to choosing." She didn't push. She just nodded and kept chopping onions. That night, after too much wine, someone asked what my parents did. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "I don't really talk to them," I said instead. No one asked why. The conversation moved on. That was the moment I understood how much emotional labor I'd been doing my entire life, just to make my family appear normal to outsiders. In December, the company finalized its year-end reports. Even after my buyout, I received a courtesy copy. Old habits die hard. I read it out of curiosity, not attachment. Whitmore Materials had stabilized. The interim CEO had cut risky contracts, refinanced debt, implemented controls my father never wanted. The company was healthier without us. That truth landed with a strange mix of satisfaction and grief. My grandmother had been right. January brought a different kind of fallout. An email from a woman named Karen Mitchell, someone I vaguely remembered from my parents' social circle. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." She wrote that she'd heard the full story recently, that she'd repeated things about me she now realized weren't true, that she'd believed my parents when they said I was difficult, ungrateful, unstable. I read the email twice, then I archived it. Not because I didn't appreciate the apology, but because I didn't need it. That was new. In February, my mother asked if we could meet again. I hesitated longer this time, not out of fear, but out of assessment. What would this cost me? We met at the same cafe. She looked older, softer, less certain of her footing. "I've been going to therapy," she said almost immediately. I nodded. "That's good. I'm starting to see things differently," she continued. "About how we raised you. About how much we relied on you being easy." Easy. The word sat between us. "I thought," she said carefully, "that if I kept the peace, everything would work out." "And did it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I didn't feel vindicated, just tired." "I don't know what kind of relationship you want with me," she said, "or if you want one at all." I considered my answer. Not the one she might want, the true one. "I'm open to something limited," I said. "Honest, without pressure." She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. "I can do that." We left it there. My father never reached out again. I heard about him through others. Retirement hadn't suited him. Without the company, without control, he seemed smaller, quieter. He'd started volunteering somewhere, or so I was told. I didn't ask where. Evan resurfaced in March, not to apologize, to ask for help. He sent a message asking if I could connect him with someone in my industry. Operations, logistics. "Just a conversation," he wrote. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'm not the person you reach out to when you need something." He didn't reply. That spring, something unexpected happened at work. My manager announced she was leaving. Promotion discussions followed. Names were floated. Mine was one of them. The idea terrified me more than the lawsuit ever had. Leadership meant visibility. Visibility meant being seen. I'd spent most of my life surviving by not being seen. That night, I sat in my condo, lights off, city glowing outside my windows, and asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. What do I want when no one else gets a vote? The answer came quietly. I want to choose. I accepted the promotion. The new role came with a bigger office, more responsibility, and the uncomfortable realization that I was good at this, not just competent, trusted. On my first day in the role, I found a note on my desk from a junior employee. "Thanks for explaining things without making me feel stupid." I stared at it longer than I should have. That was the opposite of how I'd been raised. In April, I went through old boxes while reorganizing my condo. Things I'd packed years ago and never unpacked. Childhood drawings, school awards, cards from my grandmother. At the bottom of one box, I found a photo I didn't remember taking. Eleanor and me, sitting side by side on her porch, both of us smiling, not for the camera, but at each other. On the back, in her handwriting, was a single sentence. "You were always stronger than they wanted you to be." I sat on the floor and let myself cry. Not because I was sad, because I was finally done pretending I wasn't angry. Anger isn't the opposite of love. It's the opposite of silence. And for the first time, I wasn't silent anymore. By the time summer arrived, the noise had mostly faded. Not disappeared, just dulled. Like a scar you stop noticing until the weather changes. I didn't think about my family every day anymore. That felt like progress. I thought about work, about deadlines, about whether I should finally replace the couch I'd owned since college. Ordinary thoughts, the kind that used to feel indulgent. Then, in June, I received a certified letter. Not from a lawyer, from the county probate court. I sat at my kitchen counter, envelope unopened, feeling that old, familiar tightening in my chest, the reflexive dread, the assumption that peace was temporary, that something else was about to be taken. Inside was a notice. My grandmother's estate file had been reopened. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The case had been settled, the trust restored, the buyout finalized. I closed that chapter carefully, deliberately. I called Denise immediately. She was quiet for a moment after I explained. "This isn't coming from your parents," she said finally. "Then who?" "The court," she replied, "on its own motion." That got my attention. She explained that during the discovery process, several discrepancies had surfaced that went beyond my original petition. Irregular filings, conflicting medical statements, a notary whose license had lapsed months before the amendment was signed. "I thought we were done," I said. "With your case, we are," Denise replied. "But the court has a responsibility to address potential fraud." Fraud. The word landed heavier than undue influence ever had. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said carefully, "your father may be facing more than embarrassment." I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a strange, hollow unease. I hadn't wanted punishment. I'd wanted truth. But truth has consequences whether you ask for them or not. A week later, Evan showed up at my door again. This time, he looked different. Not angry, not defensive, afraid. "They're investigating Dad," he said, without preamble. I stepped aside and let him in. "They asked me questions," he continued, pacing my living room. "About the amendment, about Grandma, about the notary. I didn't know half of this." I folded my arms. "You knew enough." He stopped pacing. "I know, and I hate myself for it." That was new. "They think he forged the letter," Evan said quietly. I felt my breath catch. "I don't know if he did," Evan rushed on. "I swear. But they think he might have. Or that someone did it for him." I thought of my grandmother's handwriting, how precise it was, how difficult it would be to fake convincingly. "I never saw the letter," Evan said. "He just said it existed." I sat down slowly. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Evan swallowed. "I don't know. Everything's falling apart." I studied him. Really studied him. For the first time, I saw him not as the favored son or the golden child, but as someone who'd built his life inside a structure that no longer existed. "I can't fix this," I said. "I know," he replied. "I just thought you should hear it from me." When he left, I felt something shift again. Not relief. Closure. In July, my father was formally notified. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from my mother. She called late, her voice shaking. "They're saying there may have been criminal misconduct," she whispered. "I don't understand how this happened." I closed my eyes. "I understand," I said quietly. "Control without accountability always ends this way." She cried then. Not quietly, not carefully. "I tried to keep us together," she sobbed. "And in doing so," I said gently, "you let him go too far." The investigation moved slowly, as these things do. Neighbors whispered. Old friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The social world my father had curated so carefully began to turn its back. Reputation, I learned, is only stable as long as no one looks too closely. In August, I received a call from the assistant district attorney. They wanted to ask me questions about my grandmother, about the letter, about my father. I answered honestly, calmly, without embellishment. When I hung up, I realized something unsettling. I didn't feel guilty. Not for cooperating. Not for speaking plainly. Not for letting the truth exist without cushioning it. That night, I took a long walk through my neighborhood. Summer air, cicadas, the hum of traffic in the distance. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed words to protect someone else's image. All the times I'd been told I was strong enough to handle it. Strength, I realized, had been weaponized against me. In September, the DA's office announced charges. Forgery, filing false documents, attempted financial deception. The headline didn't mention my name, barely mentioned my grandmother. It mentioned my father. Former construction executive charged in a state fraud case. I stared at the article on my phone, my reflection faint in the dark screen. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability catching up. My mother didn't call, After that, Evan sent one final message. I don't know how to live with this. I typed back the only honest answer I had. By choosing what you do next, the case would take time. Months. Maybe years. But for the first time, the waiting didn't feel like punishment. It felt like distance. And distance, I was learning, was its own kind of freedom. The strange thing about public fallout is that it's never as loud as you imagine it will be. There's no explosion, no dramatic collapse. Just a steady, unmistakable withdrawal. Invitations stop. Names are removed from boards. People cross the street instead of making eye contact. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. By October, my father had become someone people referred to in the past tense. He used to run Whitmore Materials. He was a big name around here once. I heard something happened with his mother's estate. I heard these things secondhand, from coworkers. From acquaintances who didn't realize the connection until they were already mid-sentence. When they noticed my expression change, they always rushed to apologize. I'm sorry, I didn't know that was your father. I would nod and say, it's fine. And it was. Because for the first time, his actions belonged to him alone. The criminal case moved slowly, but the civil consequences were immediate. My father's accounts were frozen pending review. His attorney resigned, citing conflict. The narrative he'd controlled for decades fractured beyond repair. One afternoon, Denise called me with an update. They're offering a plea, she said. For what? I asked. Reduced charges, probation, restitution. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Is he going to take it? He hasn't decided. Of course he hadn't. My father didn't bend easily. He preferred to double down until there was nowhere left to stand. That night, my mother came to my condo. She hadn't been invited. She just showed up. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before letting her in. She looked around like she was seeing my life for the first time. The clean lines, the absence of inherited furniture, no family photos on the walls. You've done well, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. I have. She sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap. The same posture she'd used my entire childhood when she wanted to say something but didn't know how. He won't listen to anyone, she said finally. Not the lawyer. Not me, not Evan. I waited. He still thinks this is your fault, she continued. That if you hadn't challenged the will, none of this would have happened. I met her eyes. And what do you think? Her shoulders sagged. I think I enabled him. That was the closest she'd ever come to naming it. He keeps asking why you won't talk to him, she said. Why you won't help. I felt no anger. Just a clean, steady boundary. Because helping him now would mean lying, I said. And I'm done doing that. She nodded slowly. I know. We sat in silence for a while. Do you hate him? She asked. I considered the question carefully. No, I don't trust him. That's different. She wiped her eyes. I wish I'd understood that sooner. So did I. In November, Evan called me from an unfamiliar number. I'm moving, he said. Out of state. That sounds like a good idea, I replied. I don't know who I am without all of this, he admitted. Without the company. Without Dad handling things. That's not my problem to solve, I said gently. I know, he said. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For my part. It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't complete, but it was real. I accept that, I said. We hung up, and for the first time, I felt like my brother might survive this. Not intact, but honest. December came quietly. No Christmas dinner. No forced cheer. I spent the holiday with friends, then alone, then content. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my balcony watching fireworks bloom over the city and realized something unexpected. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not an apology, not vindication, not reconciliation. The following January, my father accepted the plea. He avoided jail, paid restitution, accepted probation. His name appeared in the paper one last time, stripped of titles and reverence. After that, the silence was complete. I didn't reach out. Neither did he. And for the first time in my life, that silence felt earned. Not imposed. Not weaponized. Chosen. I had my own life now. One built on clarity instead of compliance. The last thing my father ever taught me was something he never intended to. Control looks powerful until it's challenged. Then it reveals exactly how fragile it always was. People assume that after something like this, there's a clean emotional ending. A final conversation. A letter. Some moment where everything is said and neatly understood. That didn't happen. What happened instead was quieter, and in many ways, harder. Life kept moving. In February, I was asked to speak on a panel at a regional operations conference. Nothing flashy, just a discussion about risk management and ethical leadership. I almost declined. Old instincts told me not to put myself forward, not to draw attention. Then I caught myself. That instinct wasn't humility. It was conditioning. I accepted. Standing on that stage, answering questions from people who took me seriously, who didn't interrupt or minimize, I felt something settle into place. Not confidence. Alignment. I was where I belonged because I'd chosen it, not because someone allowed me to be there. After the panel, a woman about my mother's age approached me. Silver hair, sharp eyes. "Your last point," she said, about transparency preventing long-term damage, that sounded personal. I didn't deflect. "It was," she nodded once. "It usually is." That was it. No probing, no judgment, just recognition. In March, my mother and I began meeting once a month. Coffee, short walks, conversations with edges we didn't rush to sand down. She talked more than she used to. About her childhood, about how conflict terrified her, about how being needed felt safer than being honest. "I thought love meant keeping everyone comfortable," she said once. "And what do you think now?" I asked. She smiled sadly. "I think comfort is a poor substitute for respect." Progress didn't look like reconciliation. It looked like restraint. Like her not asking me to call my father. Like her not defending him when his name came up. Like her sitting with discomfort instead of asking me to absorb it. That mattered. In April, I received a message I didn't expect from my father. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even addressed to me directly. It came through Denise, forwarded as part of the final closure of a minor administrative detail. One paragraph stood out. "I still believe I did what was necessary to protect the family. But I see now that protection without consent is just another form of control." I read it 3 times. It wasn't enough. But it was honest in a way he'd never been before. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing him. Because I didn't owe him emotional resolution. That realization felt like crossing a quiet threshold. In May, I visited my grandmother's grave for the first time since the trial ended. I hadn't gone before because I didn't want to turn it into a ritual of anger. The headstone was simple, clean, the grass neatly trimmed. I stood there for a long time without speaking. Then I said, out loud, "You were right." The wind moved through the trees. Nothing mystical, just air. But I felt lighter when I left. That summer, I started therapy. Not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to rebuild my life on untreated damage. I'd spent too long being functional instead of whole. In one session, my therapist asked me a question that stayed with me. "If you had stayed silent," she asked, "what would it have cost you?" I didn't answer right away. "My sense of self," I said finally. "My future. My ability to trust my own perception." She nodded. "That's not a small cost." No, it wasn't. By June, the story had stopped circulating. New scandals replaced old ones. My father became a cautionary anecdote instead of a headline. My name was no longer attached to his in casual conversation. That was the final separation. One evening, as I was cleaning out an old email account, I found a message draft I'd written years earlier and never sent. Addressed to my father. A careful explanation of why I felt overlooked. Polite, measured, desperate to be understood. I deleted it without rereading the whole thing. Not because it was wrong. Because it belonged to someone who still believed explanation could earn fairness. I don't believe that anymore. What I believe now is simpler and harder. People don't change because you prove them wrong. They change when the cost of staying the same becomes unbearable. And sometimes they don't change at all. In those cases, the most powerful thing you can do is step out of the role they wrote for you. I wasn't the difficult daughter. I wasn't the expendable one. I was the one who stopped the story from repeating. And that, I realized, was enough. The last thing I signed in this story wasn't a legal document. It was a decision. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in early fall, almost a year after the night my mother slid that unreadable document across the dining table and asked me to make things easier. I was sitting at my desk at work when an email came in from an unknown address. No subject line, just my name in the preview. I opened it. It was from my father, not through a lawyer, not through my mother, direct. "I won't pretend I'm good at this," it began. "But I'm older now, and I have time I didn't expect to have. I keep thinking about what you said in court, about silence, about consent. I don't know how to fix what I broke, but I would like to talk, even if it's just once." I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the moment people expect to be the ending, the reconciliation, the coffee meeting, the emotional release. And I realized something with surprising clarity. I didn't want it. Not because I was angry, not because I needed to punish him, but because my life no longer had space for conversations that asked me to carry someone else's discomfort as proof of my maturity. I typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Then I wrote the truth. I'm not ready to have a relationship that asks me to reopen old wounds. I hope you use this time to reflect. I'm doing the same. Please respect my boundary. I read it twice. My hands were steady. Then I sent it. There was no reply. And that was okay. That evening, I walked home instead of taking the train. The city was loud, in the way cities always are, but I felt strangely insulated from it, like I was moving inside my own lane for the first time. I passed a restaurant where a family was celebrating a birthday. Balloons, laughter, a father raising a glass for a toast. For a split second, the old ache flared. Then it passed. Because here's the truth no one tells you when you're the overlooked one. You don't heal by finally being chosen by the people who rejected you. You heal by choosing yourself in ways they never taught you were allowed. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stayed quiet at the table, the one who learned that being agreeable was safer than being honest, the one who believed love was something you earned by not needing too much. No one ever told her that love without respect isn't love at all. Over the past year, I've been asked more than once if I regret how far things went, if I wish I'd taken the settlement quietly, if it was worth losing my family. I always give the same answer. I didn't lose my family. I lost an illusion. What I gained was far more valuable. I gained my name back, my voice, my ability to say no without explaining myself. I gained sleep that isn't interrupted by replayed conversations. I gained relationships that don't require me to shrink to be included. I gained peace. That doesn't mean it was easy. It means it was necessary. The final paperwork closed in late October. Accounts settled. Filings complete. No loose ends left to pull me back into something I'd outgrown. The day after everything was officially done, I went to my condo, opened every window, and let the air move through the rooms. I made coffee. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and did nothing for a full hour. No planning, no bracing, no anticipating someone else's reaction, just existing. If you're listening to this and something in it feels uncomfortably familiar, I want to say one thing clearly. Being excluded doesn't mean you were less worthy. Being controlled doesn't mean you were loved. And choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you free. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It isn't public. It isn't about humiliating anyone. Sometimes revenge is walking away with your integrity intact and your future finally under your own control. That's what I did. And if you've ever been the daughter who was told to be grateful, the sibling who was asked to step aside, the one expected to stay silent so others could stay comfortable, this is your reminder. You don't owe anyone your self-erasure. You owe yourself honesty. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived some version of it, leave a comment and tell me what boundary you're learning to set. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about karma, family drama, betrayal, and choosing dignity over approval, take a moment to like and subscribe. Thank you for listening. This is where my story ends and where my life actually began.